What really happened with your host, Mike Rivero. You're listening to the Republic Broadcasting Network, where you'll find out what the Fukushima's going on.
And aloha, America. Welcome to our show today. It is Wednesday, August 1st, start of a whole new month, middle of the weekday, hump day, starting that long, slow glide down to Pow on a Friday, and whatever other insanity is about to fall on us, courtesy of the United States government and corporate media and all the rest of the miscreants out there who would sell their own mothers for $1. We have got a lot to talk about today. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. Mike is in our control room, ready to answer the phone when you call on in. And so let's get right on into it. And talking about the wars, obviously Iran is now being moved to the top of the list here. And I want to start with this article from uns.com, and it's written by Eric Margolis, who's generally pretty straight and reliable. It's called The Looming War Against Iran, and it says basically there's always been all this talk about war between Washington and Tehran. It's sort of a constant drumbeat in the background. But it's clearly escalating now and seems to be driven by all these pro-Israel neocons who want the U.S. military to crush Iran as it did Iraq in order to remove it as a threat or a political rival to Israel. And, of course, if Iran was smashed the way Iraq was, that would leave Israel with pretty much unfettered control of the Mideast and its oil unless Russia or Turkey intervene against Israel, which is unlikely. Now, this next part, I'm not sure if Eric got played or if it's a troubling statement. And he says some think Russia and Israel and the U.S. have already made a deal to divvy up the central Mideast. Now, the Pentagon has planned a high-intensity air war against Iran that Israel and the Saudis might very well join in. It's calling for over 2,300 airstrikes against Iranian strategic targets, airfields, arms and petroleum, oil and lubricant depot, telecommunications nodes, radar, factories, military headquarters, ports. In other words, it's going to just smash the place like they did in the opening days of the Second Iraq War. Now, who knows what's going to happen after that? Are we going to be sending more U.S. troops into Iran to be killed and crippled, exposed to very dangerous chemicals by the U.S., I might add? But it's just more. It's just constant war. Now, yesterday Trump came on out making a comment that he was willing to meet with Rouhani with no preconditions. That promise lasted less than 24 hours because already preconditions are being put on. Secretary of State Pompeo said that Iran needed to commit to fundamental changes on how to treat their own people, reduce their malign behavior, agree that it's worthwhile to enter into a nuclear agreement that actually prevents proliferation. Now, these preconditions are designed to make the offer of talks impossible. Because what Pompeo means by malign behavior is Iranian foreign policy. And Iran doesn't see it as malign. And Iran is not going to agree to deeper isolation, nor the need for another nuclear deal when it is trying to preserve the one that was already signed, which the U.S. pulled out of. Of course, the nuclear agreement Pompeo was talking about also includes Iran's long-range missiles. So it's not really looking very good. Now, how are they going to sell this war to the American people? That, of course, is the $64,000 question here. And apparently there is a new U.S. Senate resolution that calls for declassifying all 9/11 related materials because the documents may expose hitherto unknown ties between terrorists and foreign countries. In other words, they're going to blame Iran for 9/11 now. First it was Afghanistan. Oh, Afghanistan did 9/11, smash them. Oh, Iraq did 9/11, smash them. Now they're going to say Iran did 9/11, they're going to smash them. So one size fits all excuse for war. That's what's coming. That's what they're going to justify the war by saying, oh, we now have absolute proof that Iran was behind 9/11 all along. And yes, we're sorry we made a mistake in Afghanistan, and we're sorry, we made a mistake in Iraq, and we really ruined those places over this, this false assumption. But, they all had a hand in it. Every country on earth we don't like had a hand in 9/11, and we'll get around to them sooner or later. They are unfortunately becoming pathetically transparent over there in Washington, D.C. Article coming on out of Information Clearinghouse. Are we about to see the final battle of Syria? And it looks like the Syrian government forces and their allies are basically closing in on Idlib, which is sort of the last, if you want to even call it that, stronghold, the final redoubt of every one of these ISIS and al-Qaeda terrorists who have chosen to fight on rather than surrender to the Syrian army and the Russian Air Force and to Hezbollah and to a smaller degree the Iranians. Now remember, when they surrender, they have to give up their weapons. They're allowed to go elsewhere. But apparently there are still a group of people in there who are just, victory or death kind of a mindset here. And Brigadier General Suhail al-Hassan, nicknamed the Tiger, is going to take his Tiger forces with him in this final reckoning between the Damascus regime and the Salafist-inspired and Western-armed Islamists who dared to try and definitely failed to destroy Bashar al-Assad. So, now, as part of cleaning out all these Islamist bases, jihadi bases, whatever, they're finding a lot of stuff. We've been reporting on how they're finding weapons made in the U.S., weapons made in Great Britain, weapons made in Israel. But apparently they found a scrapbook for the white helmets. Huge number of photographs. And it shows the white helmets working with al-Nusra. It shows the white helmets posing with dead bodies. And basically what it means is that the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences gave the Oscar to a terrorist group. So you want to think about that one the next time you're thinking about buying a movie ticket. Gerald Celente is out there suggesting that Trump may end the 17-year Afghan war to boost the economy, which is a polite way of saying that the U.S. is running out of money for all these wars. They've dragged on far longer than anybody expected them to. The original plan, was leaked back in, I think it was 2005 by General Wesley Clark. And it was supposed to be, we're going to take 3 years in this country, then we're going to take 3 years in this country, then we're going to take 3 years in this country. It didn't work out that way. We're still in Afghanistan. We're still garrisoning Iraq, even though the Iraq government wants us out of there. We're still mired in Libya. We're caught up, co-conspirators, if you will, in Yemen. And we're losing in Syria. At some point, the U.S. is going to be running out of money and munitions. Things are not going all that well on the war effort, which is why starting yet another war against Iran is a very foolish thing to do. You've got a war-weary nation. You've got an American public that doesn't want any more war. They don't support the wars we're already in. The U.S. government lacks the 4 M's, as I like to call it. They don't have the money. They don't have the manpower. They don't have the manufacturing. And they certainly don't have the moral authority to be launching any more wars. Okay, over in Pakistan, they've just had their elections, and Islamist leader Imran Khan has won, and he's making a part of his new government basically strict support for the nation's harsh blasphemy laws, and he's got a lot of public support over that. And the concern is that this may start a period of Christian persecution inside Pakistan, because merely talking about Christianity is considered blasphemy. So there seems to be some trouble stirring up over there. South Africa is going to change their constitution to legalize taking away white farmers' land without compensation. They've been talking about this for a while, but the African National Congress will finalize this amendment to the Constitution. They're going ahead and they're going to go do it. Now, wasn't Nobel Peace Prize winner Barack Obama there just last week? Did you notice he didn't speak out against this? All right. Over in Libya, I think Libya is a good textbook example of what really happens to countries that get destroyed by U.S. wars. I mean, before the U.S. went into Libya, it was a beautiful country, major infrastructure projects bringing water all across the country. They were greening up their country, a very high literacy rate. And now here we are after, 7 years now, since Muammar Gaddafi was toppled. And there are now slave markets in Libya. And apparently black Africans are being sold for as little as $400. And that right there is the humanitarian intervention carried out by NATO to topple the evil government of Muammar Gaddafi. And Libya was transformed by NATO from the country with the highest human development index in the whole of Africa in 2009 into this lawless swamp with rival governments, warlords, and terror groups fighting to control the country. But we got rid of that golden R, and that makes it all worthwhile. So much war and misery across the globe right now. These are very, very dark times. Alrighty, over in China, their state media is saying that NATO really should be relegated to the dustbin of history. And I tend to agree in that it is operating today way outside its original charter, which was to basically act as a deterrent and defense against any attacks against the members of NATO itself. These days, it's being used as a portable army to go on in and basically run, an attack on people at the behest of Western powers. So, and again, look what they did in Libya as a good example here. Things are really heating up down in Nicaragua, and it seems like the United States can't leave that poor country alone. There's violence in the streets, and the Nicaraguan government is once again pointing the finger at U.S. meddling. And a lot of Nicaraguan asylum seekers are now fleeing south to survive. And they're saying, if I go back, they'll kill me. Apparently, Ortega's so stressed for money that some of the paramilitaries are actually taking food from the schools, the lunch, leaving nothing for the kids to eat. So the United Nations Refugee Agency is urging more support for countries taking in the Nicaraguan refugees. So here we are with more refugees coming on in here. Okay. Yeah, I saw that one already. Turning on over to Israel, we're hearing again that the takeover of the Freedom Flotilla was not, in fact, peaceful. We knew previously that people were beaten, they were tased. Apparently, the doctor on board the boat had 2 ribs broken. That's how serious the situation was. And Norway is now formally demanding that Israel explain the seizure of the ship, which was flying under the Norwegian flag in international waters, which is piracy. It's a violation of international laws, and Norway is diplomatically demanding an explanation. They won't really get a satisfactory one. Israel's just going to say, well, we knew they were going to violate our laws, and blah, blah, blah. Now, here's a refreshing story. Apparently, 70 members of Congress are urging the Trump administration to reinstate U.S. aid to Gaza in order to alleviate the growing humanitarian crisis in the Gaza Strip. And in Gaza right now, more than 50% of the children live below the poverty line, living on the equivalent of $1.74 per day. A report from the United Nations noted 95% of the tap water in Gaza is not safe to drink. and said the Gaza Strip could actually become unlivable before 2020. And the lawmakers, all Democrats, stated in a letter to U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo and National Security Advisor John Bolton on Monday. The lawmakers said the Palestinians in Gaza should not be held hostage to politics. Well, good for these members of Congress. And interesting that they're all Democrats. AIPAC is going to be out for their blood during the midterms. Hamas is accusing Israel of deliberately detaining journalists in order to try and stop the flow of information leaving Gaza to the rest of the world regarding Israel's atrocities against civilians. And basically they said the retention of the Israeli policy of detaining journalists is proof the occupation is afraid of the free journalists who report the sufferings of the Palestinians. Well, of course they are. Israel cares a very great deal about its public image. It still wants to be seen as the perpetual victim. In fact, I was noticing on cable TV last night, we're getting another flood of movies about World War II and the Holocaust and Hitler and, all these so-called educational channels, Hitler's Secret Files and, Hitler's Hairbrush and all the rest of that. It really is pathetic here. And the desperation of Israel to try and gain control of the narrative again, because they lost it after the Bloody Monday massacre. The Israeli government is providing scholarships to hundreds of students at its 7 universities in exchange for them making pro-Israel Facebook posts and tweets to foreign audiences. So if you're in the middle of a Facebook or Twitter dialogue and there's somebody out there saying, well, Israel is doing this and Israel's great and the Palestinians are evil, you're probably dealing with a paid shill. And I'm sure these students are very happy. It means they don't have to go work at the fast food restaurants to pay for their college bills here. But this program is being run directly out of Benjamin Netanyahu's office. So, now, Israel has announced that they are about to grant permission for the construction of 3,900 new settler homes in the occupied West Bank as early as next week, all of which would be illegal under international law. But Israel clearly sees itself as above international law, or above any law, whatever. So they're talking about advancing buildings in Judea and Samaria, and they use those biblical names because they're trying to erase the Palestinian identity from the territory. We don't use the P word anymore. It's Judea and Samaria. We don't call it, that P thing anymore here. Now, Netanyahu's dealing with a lot of flashback from the nation-state law, and Netanyahu has come on out with this ridiculous statement that Jews who oppose the nation-state law are traitors to Israel. And they're siding with the other without saying who the other is. Now, part of the problem is that the nation-state law is affecting a lot of people besides the Muslims, and the Druze are very upset because there's a large Druze community. They're not considered Muslim. They do speak Arabic, but they serve in the Israeli Defense Forces, and many Druze have attained top positions in Israeli politics and public service. And a lot of people around Netanyahu are saying the law has to be amended to bring them in for full citizenship, or else they've thrown the Druze under the bus right alongside the Palestinians. And so there's going to be a big, big debate about that. Now, North Korea has returned the remains of some of our war dead from the North Korean War. They are in the air right now on their way here to Hawaii. Vice President Pence is here for the repatriation ceremony, and then they're going to go to a lab here on Oahu that specializes in identifying remains of missing or POWs. So we'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And little interesting item coming out of the Pentagon. Secretary of Defense James Mattis has not briefed reporters on camera in the Pentagon since last April. His chief spokeswoman has not done so since May. And then we had this news conference at the Pentagon in the middle of July, middle of this last month. And AP reporter Lolita Baldor asked General Mark Milley, the chief of staff, about an attack in Afghanistan that had led to the death of an American soldier. But before he could reply, a Defense Department press officer cut in to say that Milley and the three officials flanking him would be answering questions only about the intended topic for the news conference, which was the announcement of the location of a new command. And then later at that same meeting, there was another reporter who came on out and said, you know, we don't have an opportunity to see you enough. We're fighting for information about what's going on in the wars. And that may mean that my earlier comment is more accurate than I thought. The wars are not going well. And they're trying to limit what the American people know about it. Certainly, they're not saying a word about what's going on in Yemen. Syria's dropped off the corporate media radar because we're losing in that one. Bad time to start a new war. It really is. Apparently, the U.S. Air Force test-fired a Minuteman III ICBM, and they had to basically self-destruct it when it developed what is being described simply as an anomaly without going into detail. It's a $7 million missile, and it was launched from California, high over the Pacific, and they're assuring us that the debris from the destroyed missile didn't hit anybody on the way down. So turning to the domestic politics here, there's been an interesting development. Apparently Joe Biden, the former vice president, is emerging as the 2020 Democrat front runner. And all I can say is, thank goodness it's not Hillary Clinton. Of course, she hasn't actually declared yet. But they're saying that it's looking like Joe Biden can pull the most support from within the party. And it's interesting because a lot of people are very uncomfortable about some of the creepy videos. But again, the Democrats are thinking that Joe Biden could make Donald Trump a single-term president. And the way Trump is going could very well be. Now, Donald Trump went on another Twitter storm and basically came on out saying to Attorney General Jeff Sessions, it's time to stop the Mueller probe right now. And the tweet said, Attorney General Jeff Sessions should stop the rigged witch hunt right now. Bob Mueller is totally conflicted, and his 17 angry Democrats that are doing his dirty work are a disgrace to the USA. And I agree with all of that. What's going to happen is the Democrats are trying to drag out this investigation, nudge, nudge, wink, wink, say no more, for another 3 months so they can campaign on the issue for the midterms. Now, if I were Trump, I would fire Sessions right now and replace him with someone like Larry Klayman, who's going to get some real, who's going to recuse himself from what was of cover-ups. He's the person that the FBI calls when they need to cover something up. And that includes his participation in the 1988 bombing of Pan Am Flight 103, the investigation into the terrorist financing of the Bank of Credit and Commerce International, BCCI, the FBI investigations into the crimes of September 11th. And here's where it gets really interesting. As a U.S. attorney in Boston during the mid-1980s, Robert Mueller helped falsely convict 4 men for murders they didn't commit in order to protect a powerful FBI informant, the mobster James Whitey Bulger, whose name I'm sure you have heard. They've even made a movie about him now. It was a huge, huge scandal. Robert Mueller put innocent men in prison for murder to protect an FBI informant. And that's good reason for Donald Trump to want him out of there. Now, apparently, not too long ago, back when James Comey was head of the FBI, there was a Iraq War veteran who trained to become an FBI agent, Omar Montoya. And we're going to tell you his story when we come back from these words from our sponsors. And aloha, America, welcome back to the show. So we're talking about this Iraq War veteran named Omar Montoya, came back from the war, became an FBI agent, and apparently saw rampant corruption inside the FBI. So he did the right thing. See something, say something. And he wrote a letter to FBI Director James Comey detailing the corruption within the Bureau. And Comey quickly took action to ruin Montoya. And I've sort of been through that experience myself back in the Vince Foster days. Comey moved to crush Montoya, even at one point trying to have him indicted as a threat to the FBI, according to well-placed FBI sources. It really is all corrupt. There's no redeeming qualities anywhere in the federal government. And as I pointed out yesterday, it's reached the point where it's become non-functional. We're at the start of the collapse. You know, collapses don't happen overnight. It can take a while, but I think this is the start of the collapse right here and right now. Now, Paul Manafort, as you know, has gone to court, and they're calling as the first witness for the defense Rod Rosenstein. And this is a very, very smart move for them to do, because Rod Rosenstein investigated Manafort 8 years ago on the same alleged charges and didn't press charges, didn't prosecute. So they're going to say, why didn't you do this? And then Rosenstein will come up with something, and they'll turn around and say, well, that still applies today. You know, why the change? And then they'll make an argument that they're dealing with politically motivated selective prosecution, which is exactly what they're doing. Now, Tom Steyer is a billionaire. He's left-wing, and he's out for Trump. And he's got two organizations, Next Gen America and Need to Impeach. And they have 1,000 employees, 2,000 volunteers, and a budget of $110 million to basically spend on the cause, leading to impeachment. The Democrats are just betting the farm they're going to get control of the House of Representatives and they can impeach Trump. Well, there's a small little wrinkle with that. You can't impeach somebody just because you don't like them. There has to be a high crime and misdemeanor, and so far, they've got nothing. Yeah, Trump strayed around on his marriage. Half of married people do. That's the reality. And I'm not making excuses for him. I think it's deplorable behavior. But it's not a threat to the nation. It's not a high crime or a misdemeanor. But they're definitely ramping up the guns. They want him out. They don't want to wait till 2020. All right, we're going to go ahead and take a phone call. Dustin in New Jersey. And Dustin, I'm sorry I let you sit in the queue. I missed it on the little screen here from the control room. What's on your mind?
That's all we have left was Trump and Hillary, Mike. You know, we're at the bottom of the barrel. He's all we got. You know, unfortunately, I voted for him, but I wouldn't. I don't know. I just don't know about him anymore. He's wishy-washy.
He's been compromised by the deep state. There's no question about that.
Hey, Mike, on Israel, isn't it amazing if you're all God's chosen one until you're not? If you don't go along with the party line, you're not part of the chosen few. You know, it's like you got to go with the collective. It's the same over here. You know, put a yellow ribbon around your tree or on your car. Support the. You know, if you support the troops, support Iraq. You know, if you speak out against Iraq, you don't support the troops. And it's happening again, Mike. You know, it's happening again with, you know, if you speak out against the intelligence agencies, you're a traitor. You're unpatriotic. I mean, this crap's got to stop. You know, like, and people like Max Boot and Ralph Peters. I don't know if you saw that Stephen Cohen on Anderson Cooper when he went up against Max Boot. And Max Boot he did a great job against Max Boot. You know, calling Stephen Cohen basically a Putin apologist. The guy has been studying Russia for 40 years. 40 years, you know? I mean, this is the kind of crap these people are. These are the enemy, Mike. I mean, you're looking at the enemy of America is this, the best, you know, this is the enemy.
Yes.
These people, you know, and how the hell do you weed them all out, though? That's what I want to know. They're everywhere, it seems. They just all have their own agendas, and they just don't give a crap about this country anymore.
Well, you know, like attracts like. You know, when you get corruption in government, it's going to grow. It reaches a point where nobody who is not corrupt is allowed into the club. And, you know, Trump was an outsider, and they all want to get rid of him because they're afraid that the few remaining uncorrupt people in government are seizing the opportunity to try and pry open the deep state. And that's where they're afraid of. That's why they're going to try and steal the House of Representatives so that they can basically shut down all these investigations.
George Carlin, it's a big club, and you ain't in it.
Yeah.
You're never going to be in the big club.
Absolutely right.
The profit.
Yeah.
Hey, Mike, you remember you mentioned yesterday about the movies, how they use that for propaganda, like the new Russian villain in the new Bond movie.
Yes.
And remember during the Sochi and the Ukrainian stuff, they.
Hello, Dustin. Did we lose you? Yeah, I think we lost him. All right, Dustin can call back in. While we're waiting for Dustin to call on, we're just getting some news. Apparently, this is being reported in the Review Journal. Radio host Art Bell has passed away. The Clark County Coroner's Office is saying it was an accidental overdose from prescription drugs. Apparently, he had oxycodone, hydrocodone, Valium, and carosupratal, which is a muscle relaxant. And basically, you know, he stepped away from radio in 2015 and was retired, but apparently he's passed away. He was an icon within the industry. Okay, Dustin is back. Aloha, Dustin. Welcome to the show. Pick up where you left off.
Those NSA people better knock this crap off.
Which crap?
Well, with me getting cut off.
Oh, okay.
No, I was talking, you know, you mentioned with the Bond villain being Russian and how they use movies like during Ukraine and the Sochi. They were running all those Russian movies against, you know, just making people hate Russia. Just like, you know, remember on TV, The American, you had all these other, Red Sparrow just came out not too long ago.
Yes.
There's another one coming out now, Mike. It's called Hunter Killer with Gerard Butler about a coup in Russia, which is funny because we got a soft coup going on here.
Yep.
You know? And it's about like the Americans go to save the president of Russia. It's like an action flick, you know. It's just more rah rah rah, fighting Russia but helping Russia. You know, it's just ridiculous. You know what it shows them? Like it shows you what they're thinking. It's a push on Russia with all this movies and stuff. Like
well,
they're
demonizing Russia. They're trying to get the Cold War back because the Pentagon wants more money and more promotions and everything. Where that falls apart, though, is America's running out of money. Now, back in the 1950s and the 1960s, it was still economic good times coming out of World War II. The world was coming to America to buy our products because we were a manufacturing powerhouse. We made the best products around the world. American agriculture was the breadbasket to the world, and the American people had lots of money, and so they could, tax the American people and give it to the military-industrial complex, and everybody would go home happy, except for the taxpayers. Today, it's different. We have people with full-time jobs sleeping in their cars. There is no money out here with which to fund a new Cold War. And what makes it especially fragile right now is that because we've lost our manufacturing, a lot of the materiel that the Pentagon uses is purchased from foreign suppliers. And if the dollar continues to fall, that's going to make it all much more expensive. This is not a time for the U.S. to be engaging in more wars. This is a time for the U.S. to be pulling back into our own borders and rebuild our nation, rebuild our manufacturing, get rid of the GMOs and rebuild our agriculture. And as Trump says, make America great again. It's just how I would do it is very different from how he is doing it. But we're overextended on all these wars. That article that we talked about where the media the corporate media is saying, we can't get information from the Pentagon, basically tells me the Pentagon doesn't have any good information to share.
What about making the world great again? You know, the problem with Trump is he wants to make America great again at, like, being the bully, though. You know what I mean? Like,
yep.
Forcing it worse than what has been going on before. So that's why I kind of don't like what he's doing anymore. Hey, Mike, I don't know if you saw the test of the Russian anti-ship missile, the KH-31, which is a smaller version of the Sunburn missile that was launched off Su-34. If you go on RT, or YouTube, you can see the video for that. Thanks, Mike.
All right, thanks an awful lot here. We're going to let you go here, and I'm getting emails from people. The article about Art Bell was sent to me as new news, labeled 3 hours ago, but apparently he did pass away earlier in the year. Still, it is a very sad circumstance. All right, now, getting on back to the news. The phone lines are open here. On Monday of this week, Attorney General Jeff Sessions announced that the Department of Justice will be creating a religious liberty task force to help the Department of Justice make sure that every lawyer and law enforcement officer in the organization is following Trump administration guidelines when it comes to protecting religious liberty. Now, last year, President Trump signed an executive order directing all administration agencies to make the protection of religious liberty and political speech a priority. And Sessions said on Monday the task force will ensure all Justice Department components are upholding that guidance in the cases they bring and defend, except, of course, for political speech on the internet, which is under constant attack. Alrighty, let's grab another phone call. Al in Canada, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. You and Dustin at the end were talking about Donald Trump and the industrial complex and basically declaring war on the rest of the world. Well, something, you kind of hinted at but alluded to, which was, Donald Trump wants to make America great again, yeah, but on the backs of the rest of the world. Like you said, Bretton Woods, drag everybody back. Everybody's under the umbrella of the United States. Let's get this Cold War going again, because we need that big enemy over there to make sure that the citizens of this country know exactly what they're doing and why they're doing it. It's insane. And I'm amazed that in 2018, that more people don't even see this. They don't even see it, Mike. I'm like, how is this possible?
I think a lot of people are seeing it. I disagree. I mean, everybody I talk to around here, and by the way, disregard what the corporate media is saying about everybody is with the wars and everybody's against Russia and everything. It's more propaganda. But just talk to your friends and neighbors. Talk to people around you, and you're going to find out that a lot of people really think this current war fever is nonsense. They don't see that Russia really is an enemy. Our saving grace, if you will, is that the powers that be are trying to replay the 1950s and 1960s using the tactics and propaganda that worked back then. But it's a very different world here in 2018. And it isn't really working. They're not getting the traction.
No, and they never will. And and like Dustin said, Hollywood's right there. It's right there, like that Pink Sparrow or Red Sparrow, whatever that film was, with that L girl. I can't think of it, but like, why are people like just saying, we're tired of this, because is not the enemy. The enemy is exactly what Dustin said, that people that keep pointing everybody in the direction of the constant, endless war.
Yep.
I mean, how much money is enough, Mike?
Well, it's, roughly $1 trillion a year altogether.
Same people have been divvying that stuff up for a long, long time, and they've grown fat and filthy rich and even more powerful than they were 60 or 70 years ago. It's the same group of people. It's the banks, it's the bankers, and it's the owners of those people, of those corporations that are destroying humanity.
And
they want it all.
Let's not forget the defense contractors. I mean, they're ready. Eisenhower warned us. Eisenhower warned us in his farewell address that we needed to be on guard against this happening.
Orwell wrote that book as a warning for the rest of us.
Yes.
Unfortunately, you know, you said it, a lot of people have others said it. Now it's used as a blueprint, national guide on how to do things. You know, there are employees, Mike. These people are employees. They work for us. When will people realize that?
Yep.
We're the ones that are in power, not them. The government's not in power. We're in power. We just give them a little rope, and you know what? They're hanging themselves, but it's not quick enough. You know, a lot of people are hurting, and you know, I appreciate your time, Mike. I hope you have a great show. Thank you.
Thanks an awful lot. We're going to let you go here. Now, Hawaii's Senator Hirono was being interviewed by Wolf Blitzer, and she was out there just frothing at the mouth and saying the noose is closing on Trump. And Blitzer asked her a specific question. He's saying, you know, President Trump has repeatedly claimed there was no collusion, and now his lawyer, Rudy Giuliani, is arguing collusion isn't even a crime necessarily. What does that signal to you? And Hirono came on back saying, I think the noose is closing. You know, Giuliani is like a loose cannon. So is the president, frankly. Conspiracy is a crime, and obstruction of justice is a crime, and it all points to how important it is for the Mueller investigation to continue. Now, Giuliani is right. Collusion is not a crime. There's no law against collusion. A lot of people collude as part of, you know, everyday life. It's just another word for working together with somebody. And notice that Hirono switched it from collusion to conspiracy, which is a crime. So that's her favorite talking point. But they're out there still pushing this thing, and they really want to drag it out for 3 months so that they can campaign on it for the midterms. We're going to take a break for commercials, and we'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. And during the commercial break, Fox News was and still is doing a story that there's a report out that Americans interact with media 11 hours a day. And it looks to me like an attempt to convince the advertisers to keep on spending ad money on the media, despite the declining ratings. Because I find that number a little high for ordinary Americans. Obviously, Claire and I interact with media, you know, for a lot in order to build the website and do the radio show. I don't think most people really do spend that much time with the media here. Getting on back to our domestic politics here, the billionaire Koch brothers are threatening to support Democrats who are pushing open borders and free trade. And apparently officials with the Cox network of organizations said they would gladly put funding in the pockets of Democrats for the midterms as long as they support aspects of their agenda, which of course includes promoting mass immigration and job-killing free trade deals. And apparently one of the organizations is Americans for Prosperity, and their CEO, Emily Seidel, told donors, I know this is uncomfortable. If you are a Democrat and stand up to Elizabeth Warren to corral enough votes for financial reform that breaks barriers for community banks and families, you're darn right, we will work with you. So they're out there pushing that globalist open borders agenda again here. Andrea Mitchell on Comedy Central's The Daily Show basically compared Donald Trump to Joseph Stalin. They weren't getting any traction comparing him to Hitler. We're tired of hearing about Hitler. But he, you know, comparing him to Joseph Stalin, saying his attacks on the press are very, very dangerous. And over at CNN, Acosta and Blitzer suggest that Trump is inciting violence against the corporate media. So they're out there trying to play the victim card and totally ignoring the fact that the reason there is so much hostility toward the corporate media is that they do lie to us constantly on every single subject. They lie about everything except the weather report and the sports scores, and they're not even that good on the weather report. These were the people who lied to us about Saddam's nuclear weapons and Assad's sarin gas. And they want to play the victims. They want to find some way they can get their audience back away from the truth movement here. Now, as you know, Donald Trump disbanded his Commission on Election Integrity and turned it all over to the Department of Homeland Security, which all they're really doing is making sure those electronic voting machines can't be tampered with from outside without looking to see if the code inside is doing the tampering. And Homeland Chief Kirstjen Nielsen came on out unequivocally saying the Russians interfered in the 2016 elections, but no actual votes were changed. Then how do you know they intervened? We'll be right back after station identification. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. And we're talking about Homeland Chief Kirstjen Nielsen coming on out and stating unequivocally the Russians interfered with the 2016 election, but no actual votes were changed, which I think would be insulting to the Russians were it actually true. But again, more Russia bashing. Russia's attempts are a direct threat to the nation's democracy. And she made a statement 2 years ago, as we all know, a foreign power launched a brazen, multifaceted influence campaign to undermine public faith in our democratic process and to distort our presidential election. So now they're blaming Russia for the fact that Americans have doubts that our elections are honest. Americans have doubts that our election system is honest because of the DNC's stealing the nomination from Bernie Sanders. Americans have doubts about the honesty of our elections because of all the times we have seen voting precincts where there are more votes than voters. They're concerned about the integrity of our elections because of all the illegal immigrants who are being encouraged to vote even though they're not legally entitled to. We have a crooked election system. The Russians had nothing to do with it. The politicians destroyed the credibility of the election system by using it to cheat their way into power and to stay there. So Kirstjen is projecting. Now, Noam Chomsky has a slightly different view. He says that Israel's intervention in U.S. elections vastly overwhelms anything Russia might have done. And basically says Israel brazenly interferes in the U.S. electoral politics. They've got AIPAC. They've got control of the media. And Noam Chomsky is saying, if you want to know somebody who's messing with our internal politics, you look at Israel. Even the New York Times ran an article earlier this year pointing out that Russia isn't the only one meddling in elections. The United States does it too. They were actually honest enough to come on out and talk about, bags of cash delivered to a Rome hotel for favored Italian candidates, scandalous stories leaked to foreign newspapers to swing an election in Nicaragua, which is probably what tripped off the violence going on down there, posters and stickers printed to defeat an incumbent in Serbia. No, it's not Vladimir Putin. It's the United States' history of intervention in foreign elections. Another article came out of Tablet magazine asking if Israel hacked the Zimbabwe elections. Apparently the Zimbabweans seem to think so. And don't forget, back in 2006, there was a recording of Hillary Clinton suggesting rigging the Palestinian elections. So, yeah. That's the reality of what's going on out there. Elections are rigged, and our election system is designed to facilitate and conceal election rigging. And we need an election system that makes rigging very hard to do and very easy to discover, which is why I wrote that article that's on my page underneath my face here. Now, as we've mentioned before, members of Congress get their medications delivered to them right in the Capitol building. And apparently over at Grubb's Pharmacy, Dr. Michael Kim basically was interviewed for Stat News. And he said, the meds that we're delivering in large volume to Congress, this is some serious medication. And basically indicates the lawmakers are dealing with some pretty serious health problems that can affect their mental faculties. And he says at first it's cool, and then you realize I'm filling some drugs for people, and these are people running the country. And apparently diabetes, Alzheimer's. And he said, they're making the highest laws of the land, and they might not even remember what happened yesterday. So, according to the latest Rasmussen poll, 51% of Democrat voters want communism in America. Yes, comrade, the Democrats are out for communism, forgetting that communism didn't work out all that well over in the Soviet Union. So let's talk about the economic news here. The total shortfall in the U.S. pension system now stands at $5 trillion. That's the size of Japan's entire economy. And state and local pension plans in the U.S. have less than 3/4 of the money they need to meet their promised payouts. This is the lowest level since at least 2001. So what are they recommending? Well, government has to increase taxes or convince pensioners to take less than they were promised or divert funds from elsewhere, like maybe the Pentagon budget. I mean, if the Pentagon could just find all that money they lost, that would cover the pension shortfall. We're going to do a shout out now to our on-air affiliates who are rejoining the network. Over in Iran, the economy is in serious trouble under the pressure of the already in place and soon to arrive U.S. sanctions. And Iranians are closing their shops and market stalls. And they're starting to protest, which is exactly what the United States wants. Try another takedown from within so they don't have to invade. Iran's elite guard is urging that drastic actions be taken to halt the rial's death spiral. And apparently they just published a confrontational statement addressed to President Rouhani, urging him to prop up the falling rial ahead of U.S. sanctions implementation. So are we looking at a coup d'etat? We might well be. And we know the U.S. was talking about it just a month or so ago, and the U.S. has done it twice before. When they brought down Mohammad Mossadegh in 1953, and then they tried to bring down Iran again in 2009, that one they failed at. So they're back trying again, mucking about with other people's countries. Now, a lot of people are starting to look at BRICS, which is transforming now from merely being an economic confederation, if you will, to starting to emerge as a political force of its own. And it is obviously at opposites with the U.S. economic war on Iran. And the takeaway from the BRICS summit in Johannesburg is that the players strongly condemn unilateralism and protectionism. And so the question is, what are they going to do about it? Could they, in fact, start doing business with Iran and overcome the sanctions? Now, Tehran is saying that Trump is wrong to expect the Saudis to cover the loss of the Iran oil supply. Because obviously when the sanctions go on in, Iran stops shipping oil, at least to the Western world. India may go on buying it. But apparently it's 2.5 million barrels of oil per day in Iranian exports. And they're doing it because they're absolutely convinced that Saudi Arabia and the other OPEC nations will just ramp up production to keep the oil and gas flowing. And Tehran says what's going to happen is these other oil producing nations are going to take advantage of the situation, they're going to ramp the price up. So you will be feeling the pain of Trump's sanctions at the gas pump. Up in Ontario, they were trying the experiment of universal basic income, and they had a pilot program, and they've now called it off because it was unsustainable and quite expensive. Yeah. Where do you get the money to just hand it to people? So, needless to say, it was a liberal government that put in that program. A stepping stone to communism, which, again, according to Rasmussen, that's what 51% of Democrats in this country want. They want communism. Article coming on out of Investment Watch blog, the number of Americans living in their vehicles is literally exploding as the middle class continues to disappear. This has become a major problem, and it's an embarrassment to a nation that is trying to portray itself to the world as a modern, advanced, industrialized nation with a healthy economy, to see people living in their cars, people with full-time jobs living in their cars, people who work for Amazon and Google and still can't afford rent. The wealth inequality in this nation has reached a dangerous level. That's the reality. Now, police sources in Spain are warning that there are 50,000 migrants waiting in Morocco to break into Spain. And some of them are coming over by boat. Some are trying to come across the border. There was that story that we had, I think it was last week, where migrants basically crashed the gate between Morocco and Spain using homemade flamethrowers, flinging poo. It's out of control. What the globalists have done is just horrible. Now, an opposition leader in Spain is basically saying that Spain has become the new center of the migrant crisis, and Conservative Popular Party leader Pablo Casado is blaming the socialist government for accepting the migrant rescue boat Aquarius, which Italy had turned away because that started it. Can't go to Italy, we're going to go to Spain. And Pablo is saying Spain can't absorb millions of Africans. And they really can't. Europe can't absorb all these people. It's strained the economy, it's caused social upheaval, it's brought all kinds of crime and previously eradicated diseases. This is a disaster. But that French non-governmental organization that was at the heart of that diplomatic row over migration said that nothing will stop it from rescuing migrants from the Mediterranean. And their ship is resuming its mission off the Libyan coast. Now, the ship is called the Aquarius. It's chartered by French aid group SOS Méditerranée. Was due to leave the southern port of Marseille later Wednesday, nearly 2 months after Italy and Malta refused to let it dock with 630 migrants on board. So this is literally a fight between the globalists and the nationalists. Right now, up in Germany, 1 out of every 4 German residents now has a migrant background. This is a record high. And apparently in Germany, a cleaning lady received a fine of 1,650 euros for criticizing the country's asylum policy on Facebook. So there's a clue right now that the New World Order, among other things, will not respect freedom of speech. You're not allowed to criticize the New World Order. You're not allowed to criticize the refugee policy. You will be fined. You'll be punished. Dissent is now criminalized in Germany. Sig Heil, Sig Heil, Sig Heil, Sig Heil. Over in Calais, migrants smash through a car window and attack a woman with makeshift wooden weapons. And apparently these two women were driving through Calais, and they ran into a mob of asylum seekers who attacked the car, smashed through the car window, and attacked them with sticks. Now, 5 or 6 of the migrants, who were heavily intoxicated from alcohol, which means they're not really devout Muslims, had reportedly been stumbling around the area insulting locals. I guess this is what they mean by cultural diversity here. Now, the Cato Institute, which is a think tank partially funded by the Koch brothers, is now saying it's time for the U.S. to have open borders. And they're advocating for full open borders to the United States of America in an op-ed for USA Today. It says the U.S. has nothing to fear and much to gain from open borders. And Americans should forget about putting a wall along the U.S.-Mexican border to stop illegal immigration. Then proceeds to make a huge number of completely bogus claims about how illegal immigrants aren't contributing to the rise in crime, about how illegal immigrants are contributing to our society. They're really pushing this agenda as hard as they can. Now, remember that Rasmussen poll of Democrats, where 51% of the Democrats want communism in America? Apparently, 54% of Democrats say illegal aliens should be given the right to vote. And we know that the Democrats are literally counting on illegal immigrant votes to prevail in November. Because in states like California, where you're registered to vote when you get your driver's license, nobody's checking. Nobody is checking. They say it's racist to ask somebody's immigration status. It isn't racist. Illegal isn't a race. Right now, there are estimated 12 million illegal aliens residing in the United States. And the Democrats want them to be able to vote. Well, who are they going to vote for? Well, they're going to vote for the Democrats. The Democrats are our friends. The Democrats open up the borders. The Democrats are taking stuff away from the Americans and they're giving it to us. Bread and circuses time. Now, getting on back to Hawaii's Senator Mazie Hirono, she was basically in an exchange with ICE Executive Associate Director Matthew Albence before the Senate Judiciary Committee. And again, talking about these parents being separated from the children and held in detention, and why are you doing that? And Albence told Mazie Hirono, again, I think we're missing the point. These individuals are there because they've broken a law. And Hirono interrupted, insisting that the illegal immigrants being held in the detention centers have broken a law only as deemed so by President Donald Trump. And Albence came on back to them saying, no, you're wrong. They are there for violation of Title VIII of the U.S. Nationality Act. Okay, USC 1325. That illegal entry is a criminal and civil violation. And those people in the detention centers are pending the outcome of the civil immigration process. They have broken the law. And Mazie Hirono finally admitted she was confused. This is a senior member of a Senate committee in charge of immigration legislation, and she doesn't know the immigration law. That is a stunner. That is just a stunner. All right, we're going to take a phone call here. Don in the Philippines, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hello, Mike. Yes, you were talking about Joe Biden as the candidate for next time. One thing about Biden, he's a good debater. I remember when he debated against Paul Ryan and he killed him.
Yep.
So Hillary is not a good. She's horrible at everything, basically. All she is calling in favors and identity, and she can take a picture of herself and she can stand there and hug a black man and say whatever that's supposed to say to everybody. I don't know, but Hillary Clinton, I don't.
Hillary may be out. I mean, I know she was thinking about it, and there was the news where she was thinking about throwing her hat in the ring. Then that was followed by another very strange story where Hillary was being advised not to run in 2020 for the sake of her family, implying not to put them through that stress of another campaign season. And I wondered at the time if somebody was sending a message to Hillary that it was time for her to butt on out, because we haven't heard anything more about Hillary running in 2020 since then. Anyway, Don, got to let you go. Got to take a break for commercials, and we'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here, and we're talking about immigration issues. Now, as you know, there has been this so-called Occupy ICE movement, and the occupiers, if you will, behaved very rudely, very violently. When they finally left their camp, they just left everything behind, including human waste. And it cost something like $300,000 to get it cleaned on up. But now a union representing agents of the Immigration and Customs Enforcement has accused the Portland, Oregon's mayor of ordering his police force to deny help when they were dealing with the violent demonstrators occupying their offices. And apparently ICE employees inside their offices, alarmed by the violence, made 2 911 calls that the police did not respond to. So, all corrupted. Whoops. My talking points just went away. Oh, there they are. Okay. Over in France, as you know, Macron is dealing with a population that is also very upset with open borders. And they've seized as a handle, if you will, this scandal involving Macron's former security aide, Alexander Benalla, who's under formal investigation for violent acts and interfering in the work of public services. There are also rumors floating around that Macron and Benalla were lovers. And there was talk about having a no-confidence motion, but the lower house in France has now rejected that. But this is going to haunt Macron for as long as he's in his office. Okay, over in Denver, a little bit of a tragedy. There was this gentleman, Richard Gary Black. He's 73 years old, Vietnam veteran. And about 1 in the morning, there were intruders that came into the home, one of whom threatened his grandson. And so this Richard Black, who's a decorated veteran, shot the intruder. Now, at that point, the police came on in, and seeing Black holding a gun, shot and killed him. It's very dicey calling the police. They don't check their targets. I mean, where is the drop your gun or I'll shoot? That didn't happen. They came on in, they saw the gun, they pulled the trigger. Now, today was supposed to be the first day you could download the data files for 3D gun printing, but it's back on hold again. A federal judge in Seattle has granted a temporary restraining order, and so DefCAD has now basically had to pull all those files, which I don't think is really going to change anything. The files are already out there on the internet somewhere. I'm sure they're being traded on the dark web for people who are into such things. But again, this is a violation not just of the First Amendment regarding the data files themselves, but our Second Amendment, our right to keep and bear arms, even if we make them ourselves. And I understand where the gun grabbers are coming from. They're afraid. They understand the American people have just about reached the limit of their patience. Now, over in Great Britain, Tommy Robinson has been released from 2 months of solitary confinement. He looked terrible. He suffered greatly in there. He's the founder of the English Defense League, and apparently the court quashed his conviction for contempt of court. They're going to order a new trial, but apparently the court was looking at the matter and said there were some procedural flaws. The conviction is quashed, and he's been released. So a little bit of a victory there. Meanwhile, over at the Ecuadorian embassy, there's talk that Assange may be leaving the Ecuadorian embassy very soon, and the issue appears to be his deteriorating health. Apparently, he has not been doing very well. They need to take him to a hospital. Ecuador is still trying to make sure that he's not going to be maltreated after that. Now that charge against him, that sexual assault charge, was dropped, turned out to be made on up. But the U.S. wants Assange. He embarrassed them tremendously. Britain is an ally. Now, supposedly, according to that World Court that we quoted the other day, countries that grant asylum in their embassies are obligated to provide a safe passage out of the embassy for the people who are the asylees, or the people being given asylum. Otherwise, what's the point? As soon as they step outside, they're grabbed. So we'll see what happens with that. Anyway, we're going to take another break for commercials. We've got a caller waiting on the line. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our program. We're going to take a phone call from Tony in Puerto Rico. Tony, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha, Mike. Listen, I don't want to put you on the pressure cooker, or I know you're not Aristotle, but do you believe there's life in the universe similar to ours or more advanced? If they are more advanced, why haven't we, or they contacted us?
I'm absolutely convinced there's life elsewhere in the universe. I know for a fact that there is on Mars. I think we may be beneath their notice, because civilizations tend to evolve right alongside their technology, and assuming that there is a way around the speed of light barrier, they may just whiz on by and find us uninteresting. When you drive down the freeway in your car, do you stop and visit every single anthill? I mean, that's the kind of a gulf that we're talking about between a spacefaring race and our current level of civilization. Now, the other issue is that it may turn out that the speed of light is unbreakable, and the theories of warp drives and wormholes and all the rest of it are just pleasant science fiction, in which case the only way we're going to know those other civilizations are out there is to eavesdrop on their equivalent of radio and TV broadcasting, which is a big part of what China built that fast radio telescope to do. So that may work. I had a different idea of trying to listen for the emanations from alternating current power systems, but I'm up against a problem with that, because radiative power increases with frequency, and when you're down at those very low frequencies, it's not very, very strong. As far as whether the life will be like us or not, I seriously doubt it. We are the end result of billions of years of accident and chance adapting to our environment. And other life forms are going to adapt to their environment. There were so many different branches of life. It's almost a matter of luck that our intelligent civilization came out of our particular branch of the animal kingdom. I mean, had it not been for the Chicxulub meteor, the dinosaurs might have become the intelligent, dominant species on this planet.
Okay. Thank you, Mike.
All right. Thanks an awful lot. We're going to let you go here. Okay. Now, a little bit of good news for those of you in New York who like to indulge. Manhattan District Attorney Cyrus Vance announced that his office will no longer prosecute most charges for the use or possession of marijuana. Starting as of today, prosecutors will not file charges for such offenses committed in New York City. So light them up, have one for me. Over in Greece, they're still dealing with their wildfires. Everybody seems to have wildfires right now. Greece is still insisting it was set by arsonists. And basically, it's being called the deadliest in a century. The death toll has hit 91. Most of these people died in the fire. Others leapt into the ocean and drowned there. So it is a mess, like those poor people of Greece have not already suffered enough under the European Union. Now, this story really bothers me. Apparently, there are these signs being put up near schools, and apparently one was put up around Willamette Primary School. Hal Turner says they're popping up all over the country. And it's basically a sign that says, pedophiles are people too. And it shows an adult figure with a red heart and a little tiny kid with a red heart holding hands. And one thing that struck a lot of people was the background is rainbow and looks remarkably like the gay pride flag. Now, the LGBT community is already trying to distance themselves from this. As well they should, because this could trigger a backlash. You know, one step too far and everybody's going to say, we've got to get rid of all these preverts. And I'm sorry, I'm willing to be accepting of what consenting adults do, but I draw the line at kids. I'm sorry, I draw the line at kids. We're talking children who are not really old enough to understand what sex is. And when you force that on them, you're stealing their innocence. They stop being a child at that point. They're forced to grow up way too soon. In our society, children are already being forced to grow up sooner than they should, led on by mass media, you know, in a rush to just, you know, turn them into consumers as quickly as possible and get more money out of them. The trip from childhood to adulthood is a one-way trip. You don't get to turn around and go back. You don't get to go back to believing there's a Santa Claus and an Easter Bunny. I think children should be allowed to be children for just as long as they can. They'll be adults eventually. It happens to us all. So, apparently, this social justice issue is now getting into the world of comic books. And there was this article that came on out from 12160 about how superheroes are promoting LGBTQ tripe instead of fighting crime. And they list a few examples. Thor, now this is not in the movies, these are in the comic books. Thor was briefly reborn as his former girlfriend, Jane Foster. But that provoked a huge reader backlash, and so he was switched back. Meanwhile, Thor's brother, Loki, the god of mischief, is sometimes depicted as a woman with bisexual tendencies, which is a betrayal of the character's mythology. He was a manly man in the Norse mythology here. In the Gotham City Sirens, the supervillains Poison Ivy, Harley Quinn, and Catwoman are also being portrayed today as bisexual, expressing romantic feelings toward each other despite their famous heterosexual relations with Batman and the Joker. Now, Batwoman, not Batgirl, is a lesbian in an open relationship with Gotham City cop Renee Montoya. Now, this basically is setting the stage for the Supergirl program, which is going to introduce the transgender superhero Dreamer. This is coming out in the fall. And it's all causing readership to drop with all this social experimentation with characters that they've grown up knowing to be a certain way. And this gets me to Doctor Who. Because, as you know, this fall, we're going to have the first female Doctor Who. Now, I don't have a problem with it. Claire doesn't have a problem with it. But I am predicting there will be a Whovian backlash to some extent. And I notice BBC is advertising this like crazy. They're trying to sell the idea, get everybody used to the idea. But I think there's going to be a backlash. There'll be an audience drop. And by the way, because I had absolutely nothing else to watch on TV the other day, I finally got to see the feminized Ghostbusters. You know, the remake with the all-girl cast. It was terrible. It was absolutely terrible. It seems like, you know, they didn't really have a script. The only real justification to make Ghostbusters with an all-female cast was to make Ghostbusters with an all-female cast. That's a bad business model here. Now, if they'd made the original one with an all-female cast, it still would have been a huge success because that was a well-made movie. It had a good script. Which brings us to the plastic straws. I mean, we're living in a country where men can go use the ladies' room if they want, and our superheroes are LGBTQ now. We're seeing posters saying pedophiles are people too all over our cities, but by golly, they're getting rid of those plastic straws. And they're going to do it with teeth here. Apparently, out in Santa Barbara, California, they have a new ban on plastic straws that brings sizable punishments. If you violate Santa Barbara's plastic straw ban, you can go to jail for up to 6 months and a fine of $1,000 per violation. Now, a couple of things about this. One, this is yet another pointless distraction to get Americans talking about plastic straws when we should be talking about the war in Yemen. And the other thing is, it's something the government can do to make it look like they're doing something in the face of their utter impotence to do anything about the problems that really affect our lives, like the economy, the crumbling infrastructure, the decline of the middle class. They can't fix any of that. You know, we can't do anything about people who've got full-time jobs who still have to live in their cars, but by golly, we're going to get those plastic straws. We'll show you we're good government. We're getting those plastic straws here. Okay, over at Microsoft, and by the way, I could use a few phone calls because in the absence of a lot of phone calls, I'm getting to the end of my talking points here. Microsoft, and we knew this was coming, Microsoft is launching a paid monthly subscription service to keep users' Windows 10 machines running as they should. No more free automatic updates. You're going to pay for the operating system. You're going to subscribe to the operating system month to month to month. This is similar to the launch of Office 365, which replaced the one-time purchase of Microsoft Word with a rolling monthly subscription. I am absolutely opposed to this business model. It's obviously being done for no other reason than to make Microsoft more money than it already has, which is considerable. And basically, at a time when our economy is seriously in trouble, that subscription model can actually be the death knell for businesses. And I'll give you an example here. Focusing on what really happened and the radio show, I haven't done any visual effects or animation work for some months now. Okay, but the software is still on the machine where if somebody were to call, I could fire it on up and get some work done. But if I were on a monthly subscription and I didn't have the money to pay the monthly subscription, I can't put the company into hibernation because of those subscriptions. This is a bad idea. It is a very, very bad idea. What it's going to do ultimately is drive people in other directions. Now, Windows 10 is being forced on us all, even though it's a terrible operating system. I'm still trying to learn it, and I absolutely loathe it. But as far as Office 365 is concerned, go to open source. Go to Open Office. It does everything that you're going to need. Office 365 has got a lot of bells and whistles in there most people never use. So go to Open Office. It's free. And it's got everything that most people are going to need. Now, as I mentioned before, there is a war on for control of America's mind here. And apparently during a recent appearance on Bloomberg, Council on Foreign Relations President Richard Haas lamented on the destruction of international institutions and the lack of oversight to rein in the anarchy on the internet. And he's basically saying the internet has become the Wild West. So they're pushing for some kind of censorship. First Amendment be gosh darned here. And apparently Senate Democrats are circulating plans for a government takeover of the internet. This is coming from Reason Roundup. And this leaked memo circulating among Senate Democrats contains a host of totally outrageous authoritarian proposals to regulate digital platforms, purportedly as a way to get tough on Russian bots and fake news, to save Americans' trust in our institutions, democracy, free press, and markets. Well, Americans have lost trust in our institutions, democracy, free press, and mistakes and markets because of the behavior of the institutions, the democracy, the free press, and the markets. But they're looking for a scapegoat. They're realizing if they don't impose a monopoly on the propaganda machine on the American people, they're going to lose. The American people are, in fact, waking up. So this is a very alarming development out there. All right, we're going to take a phone call. James in Ohio. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi. I still recall the first gay pride parade that was nationally broadcast on television news. I believe it was on CNN, and I think it was summer of 1986, and I believe it was in San Francisco. But even the reporter on the scene cringed because a lot of the participants were in S&M outfits, lots of leather and chains, and there were a lot of fat old men leading around young boys who were crawling on all fours, leading them on dog leashes and collars. And the fact is, when you find public acceptance of homosexuality, pedophilia will follow. The thing about Russia, I wanted to mention, Harvey Fierstein wrote an article to the New York Times accusing Russia of having anti-gay laws, but a gay lawyer who was fluent in Russian language as well did an analysis of that and found that the only laws that Russia had that would affect that situation were they have laws preventing, let's say it's illegal to present sexual material to children. It doesn't specify hetero or homosexual, which is what they're really all upset about.
I think that's a common sense law. I really do. I really do. And yes, I've seen some of the videos of the gay pride parades, and it's like they're out there to intentionally shock and upset people, and that's not a good way to build public support. The one about old men leading around little children on dog chains, that one I find absolutely disgusting.
Right. Bill Maher said something on this issue once about, we saw public acceptance of homosexuality in antiquity, in Greek and Roman culture, but the fact is, when you start it, if you read, the historical references, when you read about that, the public acceptance of homosexuality was concomitant with those civilizations' decline. Nowadays, unfortunately, we have endocrine disruptors, and I would say that Western nations have got and Japan probably too, have got a double dose of endocrine disruptors, and that's one big reason that immigration's a problem, because Africa and Arabia and Mexico, I would say most definitely have not got these. And Ahmadinejad said they didn't have homosexuals in Iran.
James,
okay.
I got to put you on hold.
Okay.
I got to put you on hold. Don't hang up, and we'll be right back after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here, and we're talking with James in Ohio, and we're talking about the possible impact of chemicals on our gender identity. We brought this subject up before, when somebody put together a list of all the chemicals we're exposed to that potentially could be having these kind of effects on us. Like the omnipresent radiation in the air, the sum total of it should be an area of concern, because it's always increasing. And looking at just all of these different chemicals in our food, in our cleaning products, it's an issue. But again, nobody wants to fund research to look into this as long as it's making money.
Yeah, what I was saying before the break, Ahmadinejad said they didn't have gays in Iran in the numbers that they did in the West, and everybody laughed. But if they weren't eating Western diets with plastic bottles and plastic tin can linings with a lot of endocrine disruptors in them, he's most likely right. But you'll see that change if they begin to adopt more Western diet items. But anyway, so that's one reason immigration's a problem, because the males in the West are somewhat feminized, because it's like pregnant mothers are basically taking the equivalent of birth control pills, and it wounds the neuropsychological development in the womb. And women who have been exposed in the womb to endocrine disruptors become more promiscuous, and so we just don't have the wherewithal to resist. It's like the immigrants are an invasive species. They have no natural predators, therefore they take over everything. That's the way
a rather interesting way of putting it here. But yeah. It is a real problem. The world is being steered in an absolutely dangerous direction, and I know it's this dream of a one planet, one government, one private central bank, where we're all going to stand around, hug each other, and sing Kumbaya. It's not working out, though. We're leading to a situation where there's already rioting in the streets all across Europe. There's rioting in the streets of America. And it all goes back to a basic failing of the liberal philosophy. The liberals actually believe that they can change human nature just by changing the environment. And you can't. Human nature is what it is. It's the result of a million years of evolution. It comes down to the idea that the people in power, the best way for them to stay in power is to destroy, and to fight them you have to create, and creating takes a lot more time and effort. So, but that's all I have for you. Thanks, and keep up the good work. All right, thanks an awful lot. And we've got another caller waiting on the line, but we're going to wait for that until after station identification, which is going to be coming up real briefly. Apparently over in Texas, the Senate just voted to say no to boys entering the girls' bathroom, showers, and changing rooms at schools across the state. It was a 21-10 vote down along party lines. So here you have the Democrats voting to let boys see your daughters in the showers. Think about that. We'll be back after station identification. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. Hour number 3. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. And we're going to go back to the phones here. Laura in Michigan, aloha. Thank you for waiting patiently. What's on your mind today?
Oh, hi, Mike. You had a caller earlier who said, how come nobody's saying anything about everything that's going wrong in this country? We are talking. Nobody's listening. That's the problem. We're saying it, but nobody's listening to us.
Yes.
And another thing, don't you agree?
Yes, I agree.
Yeah. Another thing I'm concerned about, I see these rallies of Trump. Everybody's screaming and yelling. It's like, do you remember in the 1960s when the Beatles came to town? And the girls are screaming and crying and just emotional. And I just don't think that all this emotional outbursts that they're having, that they can critically look at what's going on in the world. It's getting way too emotional.
Well, I'll let you in on a little secret. You know, back when the Beatles were touring, those girls who would yell and scream and faint were hired. Was part of the public relations, which isn't to say the Beatles weren't a sensation, but a lot of the buzz was manufactured, playing the same game. But getting on back here now, you're right. The violence at these demonstrations and protests is being intentionally fanned up by people like Maxine Waters, and it's leading to a situation where we are going to see actual rioting in the streets. Now, fortunately, down in Tampa, Florida, the cameras focused in on the anti-Trump protesters, but a reader who was actually there sent in a wider angle photo. and there really weren't all that many people there. So probably that's the reason violence didn't break out, because the anti-Trump protesters were so terribly outnumbered. I'm
talking about actual Trump supporters, not the anti-Trump, the Trump supporters. I think of the screaming and yelling. I just think they're letting their emotions get in the way of them thinking critically about what's going on.
Well, I think they were cheering and yelling for the same reason people cheer and yell for their favorite sports team or rock band. It's the moment. It's that shared energy of actually being in the same room with the president. It doesn't mean they're not thinking critically when they're back home.
Well, I hope so. I've just been concerned about it. I want to make sure that people, I know Kelso said when he was there, he was screaming and crying and everything. And I just don't think, is he looking at everything that's going on with Trump? He's not doing everything perfectly. He keeps saying, well, he's not Jesus. But then the next line, he says, here comes Trump out of the clouds. I'm like, what the heck? I just don't get it.
Well, I think, I'm cheering and screaming that thank goodness it's not Hillary up there. That may be part of the crowd's reaction.
Yeah. I want to say one more thing about Putin. Part of the reason they hate Putin is he stopped Russian adoption because the United States was starting to adopt babies out to homosexual couples.
Yes.
And when he found that out, he went to stop adoption, which was right. He didn't want his babies going to homosexual couples.
Yeah.
And I think he was right about that.
Yep. It's a hot topic. A lot of people concerned about that. And of course, again, it's a very touchy subject. I wonder if anybody has actually done any studies on the development of children who are in gay, families, if you were, gay marriage families. Are they growing up perfectly normal? Are they growing up predisposed to being gay themselves? Normal children will get something from the fathers and something from the mothers. But if you've got two fathers or two mothers, there may be stuff missing that the child needs. Just a thought.
Got to be confusing to the child. It has to be. I
imagine it would be, especially when they start going to school and they start seeing that other children have, a mother and a father. They're going to be asking some very interesting questions, and I just hope that the parents are prepared to deal with that.
Well, that's why they want to stop using the words mother and father. Use partner or other, whatever,
Well, if they want to do that in their own home, that's absolutely fine. My concern is they're trying to get everybody to stop using those words when they're perfectly appropriate words. And this is what I mean when I say that the LGBTQ agenda has gone from merely being about acceptance to being in-your-face militant. And it's the same mistake the feminists made back in the 1990s and the LGBTQ. They got to start seriously thinking about, their public image. And it's got to be a lot less confrontational, or there will be a backlash.
Now let's talk about MAP, M-A-P. Minor attracted person, which is a pedophile. That just scares the heck out of me. I got two granddaughters, and I tell my daughter-in-law, watch these girls like a hawk.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, this apparent campaign to try and normalize pedophilia is just way, way, way out there. And it's another symptom that our society is breaking down.
I remember back, my father said, in 1940, his mother said to him, son, I don't see how things are going to get any worse in 1940.
Yeah, they sure are worse now. They really, really are.
She thought it was bad back then.
Sorry, say again?
She thought it was bad back then in 1940.
Yeah, well, it's definitely bad now. I mean, I've been doing this job here for almost a quarter of a century, and every year it just seems like things get worse, get more wacko, more people are suffering, more wars are being declared, more infrastructure is rotting. It's very clear to me overall that this nation is headed in a very, very bad direction. It's being looted and plundered by the billionaires, and that should not be. If you want to have a healthy long-term economy, you can't let the wealth inequality reach the stage where people working full-time jobs are having to live in their cars. That's unacceptable.
It just proves to me that the Bible is true. But it says in the Bible, the whole world lies in wickedness, and about the sorceries and the pharmakia and all that. Everything the Bible has in it is happening now. And people have to realize that the Bible is true. So.
All right. Well, thank you very much for the phone call here, and we're going to switch over to Lauren in Ohio. Aloha, Lauren. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike. I was actually calling about some computer help. I wanted to know some stuff, but just because we're on that topic, I'll just mention quickly. The reason they want to get rid of mother and father is because mother and father have property rights. Parents don't. It's legalese, and a parent is not the equivalent of a mother or a father. And so they want to remove your ability to actually control your property, which is your offspring, until they're 20. I mean, the age of majority in the Bible is 20. So that's what that's about, because they can't actually get after them. I mean, I've had CPS out here. Somebody reported me, you're talking bad about the government. You're talking bad about vaccines. You're neglecting your children's education. Because I homeschool my children. I don't apply. I don't ask permission. I don't fill anything out or, have any third party testing them. It's none of your business. This is my life. It's not a group project. I'm not asking permission. I don't need permission. And I, just told the little CPS worker, hey, I don't have a contract with you. My children aren't ward to the state. Get off my land and don't come back. And they sent a letter, oh, we find no problem with you. So I want people to understand you do have all the power. And then that lady was right about the Bible. Life is simple if you just yield to the truth. You shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you free. And my people are destroyed for lack of knowledge. Put those two together, and you got what's going on right now. It's a simple matter to obey the Ten Commandments. Atheist or not, you don't want to be stolen from. You don't want anybody bearing false witness against you. You don't want anybody murdering you. And we're running around as the United States supporting invading other countries to steal their stuff, and we don't even get the booty. I mean, not that it would be a good thing if we did, but, we don't seem to understand right and wrong anymore. So we're getting, they're actually right. The thing you see before you lose your civilization is homosexuality and pedophilia. And we've just got that we don't really have it in space, but they're pushing it.
Yes.
And, the appearance, it's when she was saying, we're all saying it, but nobody's listening. We're all listening. They just don't report it. You see what I mean? Our natural inclination.
Whoops.
Oh, boy. Our natural inclinations are. Okay, let me ask my question because this phone is going to do something funky. What animation software do you use? What kind of computer do you use? And do you have?
Okay, well, Lauren, I use the Maya 3D computer animation, obviously Photoshop. I have a license for 3D Studio Max, but I've never been able to get to install on this machine here. The machine itself is a custom-built box, a white box, that I basically put together myself. It's got 8 processors, and it's really very, very good. I'm sorry?
I was just going to say, so the phone line's been out for a month. They just fixed it, and that was somebody trying to dial, and it's coming in through. I missed what you had just said. You said Maya?
Yes.
How do you spell that?
M-A-Y-A.
Maya is the software.
Yep.
For animation?
Yes.
Okay, and then what was the other one you said? Something 365?
Well, another package is called 3D Studio Max, which does pretty much the same thing as Maya. So you really only need one of them. If you're just learning computer animation, you might want to start with something much simpler and certainly much less expensive, like Blender, that's out there, and just start putting together. Just start learning the basics there. Maya and 3D Studio Max, they're very high end. It's what we use on movies.
And do these work with Linux computers?
I believe that, yeah, Maya will work on Linux because we were using Maya on Linux on Final Fantasy. So, yeah, there is a Linux version.
Okay, and then what would you suggest? We have a Windows 10 computer that we never put on the web, but some of that software, it makes you connect to use it. And so
Yes.
we're trying to figure out, we want to get a new computer that is specifically for animation. They're making anime and cartoons and that kind of thing, and they're good. I mean, they're good at this, but I don't have the right equipment. So what would you suggest
listen,
for
Lauren,
a computer? Apple to China?
Lauren, we're kind of wandering far afield here. Why don't you drop me an email with all your questions, and I'll reply back to you, because we've got callers waiting on the line and we're not being fair to them. So thank you very much for that phone call. And we're going to switch over to Chuck in Texas. Aloha, Chuck. Thank you for waiting patiently. What's on your mind?
Michael, my favorite radio host. One simple question. Yep, I've said it many times before. Still don't believe that Trump is part of the New World Order.
They wouldn't be trying to get rid of him as hard as they are trying to get rid of him if he were really part of the club. He's been compromised. He's been brought to heel. He's definitely under their control. He's giving them pretty much everything they want, and still they're trying to get rid of him.
Are they really, though? On what charge?
Well, you know, you've got the Mueller investigation, which has come up blank. You've got the Democrats screaming for impeachment, and I don't think it's theater. I think they're still throwing the tantrum from Hillary's having lost in 2016. And Trump is a threat because if any of these congressional investigations hit pay dirt, he's not going to shut them down. But I do wish he would put on his president.
His appointments in place.
He is a disappointment. I agree. I'm disappointed in him.
In place. They cannot get ahead. What charges? Collusion? That's not a crime. He's committed no crime. They'll never charge him with anything. He knows that. They know that. The Democrats didn't want Hillary. They allowed him to win by not cheating big enough for her, freaked her out.
Oh, that's kind of distorted logic here. I mean, the DNC stole the nomination from Bernie Sanders to give it to Hillary Clinton. So don't tell me this idea that the Democrats didn't want Hillary to win. She was their darling. She was their absolute darling going on in. She was being put into the White House to basically keep all the cover-ups in place regarding all the corruption that's been going on all the way back to Arkansas in the 1980s.
I just ask everyone to do this one thing. Look at Trump through an Obama lens. If Obama had appointed Bloody Gina to be the head of the CIA, if Bloody Gina or Trump had put his entire cabinet in place, if Obama had done it, we'd be just in arms. Because of look at who they are. But because it's him, the resistance just evaporated. Mike, I love you. I just wanted to chime in and, of course, once in a while, give my thing that I believe Trump is the biggest traitor we have had. Obama was a sock puppet, but this guy has really drug us down the line, and he's there to put Pence in next. Have a great one.
All right.
I will continue to contribute, of course.
Thanks an awful lot. We do appreciate it. The network appreciates it. And I don't think it's a case of Trump dragging us down as much as he's along for the ride. And it's like I've said before, a lot of people tend to blame Herbert Hoover for the Depression of the 1930s, but Hoover did not create the Depression of the 1930s. It was created for him by the money junkies. And when you have that much money power concentrated in too few hands, they wield that power. And that is a big part of what's gone wrong with this country, when you have the Koch brothers and Sheldon Adelson out there that can literally buy whatever politicians they need to implement whatever harebrained agenda they're pushing. All right, so let's go back to the phones. Mitch in Ohio, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike. You were talking about securing Windows 10, and you said you had an article about it on your website, but I can't find it anywhere. Where do I look?
You may have to go down to page 2 or 3. Down at the very bottom of the page, there's a little bar of numbers that will take you to other pages. And or you could just go into a search engine and just say securing your privacy on Windows 10, and you'll find a whole bunch of stuff.
All right. I'll give that a try. Thank you.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to switch over to Pete in Florida. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
All right. I got a little bone to pick about you and the conversation with the woman about gay parenting and whether or not their upbringing is going to be any different than the other functional, quote-unquote, functional parenting skills. I grew up from a single-parent household. My mother is a malignant, narcissistic psychopath. Okay, my father was a second-generation alcoholic. I'm a third-generation alcoholic. And I guarantee you, gaydom and, sexuality or homosexuality doesn't have anything to do with my upbringing, but I guarantee you it's not any different than two gay people, raising somebody from childhood who don't have afflictions like that, because I guarantee you there are a lot more reasons to snark and bite on people just because of their race or because of their proclivities for raising a kid wrong. And I guarantee you right now, the woman that raised me would be called an upstanding citizen, and I guarantee you right now I can prove that she is not.
Well, let me give you a hypothetical here, okay? And I know I'm going to get in trouble for this one. But let's say that you have two gay men and they adopt a baby. Okay, that baby will not be breastfed. And as we pointed out the other day, scientists are now confirming that natural mother's milk has all kinds of enzymes and other chemicals the baby needs for development. These two gay men, unless they hire a wet nurse, they're going to be feeding that baby that manufactured bottled formula, which is nowhere near as good for the baby as natural mother's milk. So that's one area in which this is detrimental to the child, to the child's development. Anyway, listen, we're going to have to let you go. We got to take a break for commercials. We'll be right back after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And we're, the phone lines are open right now. So let's get on back to the news. We're talking about computers, and Microsoft has just announced they're rolling out election defense technologies. And this is supposed to be an enhanced cybersecurity program aimed at providing enhanced protection for political campaigns and election authorities. Now, they launched this basically this last week, and it was first noted by Bleeping Computer. This so-called Account Guard program is being rolled out ahead of the 2018 U.S. midterm election. So, oh goody, another liberal corporation with their finger in the election system. My concerns are that it's only 3 months until the midterms, which means deployment and debugging of this system is problematic at best. And, of course, Microsoft is taking the point of view that, if there's something wrong with computerized voting, we'll just sell another software product to deal with it. I take the other view. It's time to take these computers out of the process and make it totally transparent to the American people. And again, if you go to my main page, right up at the top, right underneath my picture, there's an article there, How to Have Honest Elections. And I'm not saying it's a perfect system, but it is designed to crowdsource the actual counting of the election, or to crowdsource the verification of the count, and to basically make it very, very difficult to cheat the election, as opposed to our current system, which seems almost designed to facilitate and conceal election fraud. We have to have a change. If we're ever going to get control of this country back to we the people where it belongs, we've got to have an honest election system, and we don't have one right now. And I'm sure that those who are trying to find a way to defend America's democracy and institutions against, fake news on the internet, they're not going to like what I'm saying. They want you to believe that the election system works perfectly. They want you to believe that there's no cheating going on. They want you to believe that there are no illegal immigrants voting. But we learned in 2016 just how crooked this whole thing is with the ouster of Bernie Sanders. And then you had Nancy Pelosi turning around and saying it was perfectly okay for the Democratic National Committee to cheat the primaries to give the nomination to Hillary Clinton. Well, if you're going to cheat it anyway and just hand it to Hillary, why bother going through primaries anyway? To get you to believe that you still have a voice in the government when you don't. So, alrighty, now then, apparently Republicans are finally standing up regarding the revelations that Twitter has been suppressing conservatives. And Representative Matt Gaetz, who himself was suppressed in search results, has filed a complaint against Twitter with the Federal Election Commission. Representative Devin Nunes has promised to look into legal remedies against the company. And President Trump has vowed action against what he calls illegal and discriminatory practices on the part of Twitter. I'm not sure illegal actually does apply, but it's certainly discriminatory, and it certainly violates the spirit of the First Amendment. And you know what's really interesting is you have all these liberals out there saying, well, you know, Facebook and Twitter are private companies, and, you know, they can do the traffic they want and they can reject the traffic they don't want. These are the same liberals that when a baker refused to make a wedding cake for a gay couple, they were up in arms. We will force you, you know, to make that cake for that gay couple. How dare you, you know, discriminate against them? So it's another illustration of the mental flexibility, as it were, of the liberal establishment here. But at this point, somebody needs to frighten Twitter and these other Silicon Valley companies away from playing politics, of using the power that they've acquired to impose their own agenda on the rest of us. Because that's not what we sign up to these media platforms to do, to be told, you know, what to think. These social media platforms are being compromised just like the corporate media. They're being told what to tell you to think. That's dictatorship. That's propaganda. Now, over in Great Britain, as you know, they had a talk with Zuckerberg, and they finally issued a report from the Parliament recommending, of course, more laws to deal with the problem. And the recommendations include clear legal liability for tech companies to act against harmful and illegal content with failure to act resulting in criminal proceedings. Well, who gets to judge what's harmful? See, that's what it all comes down to. When they're out there with the government and these corporations saying, you know, we're going to fight against fake news. Who gets to decide whether it's fake or not? That really should be left up to you. You should be able to read all points of view and then decide for yourself. That's what freedom means. And that's what they're trying to take away. We'll be right back after these few words. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. And that plane carrying the 55 cases of the remains of American servicemen lost during the Korean War has now arrived here on the island of Oahu. And there's either going to be or has been a repatriation ceremony attended by Vice President Mike Pence. The remains are now going to be taken to the POW-MIA Accounting Agency, which there's one located right here on Oahu. They're going to be doing the work here. And the accounting agency has been for decades collecting the DNA of family members of servicemen who were unaccounted for, not just in North Korea, but in Vietnam and Cambodia and places like that as well. So they're hoping they're going to be able to do some matches. Apparently, there was actually only one dog tag that was found with the remains. So they're back home, and hopefully the families will get some closure out of that. Getting on back to the world of computers and social media here, over at redstate.com, they're running a report on how the tech world is still screwing conservatives, but it's beginning to hurt their business. Now, when all these companies were starting up, whether it was Facebook or Twitter or YouTube, they welcomed everybody in. We want everyone in. We got to build our user base. We got to build our ad revenue. So we're into this thing for making money. Well, now they got a lot of money. Their employees don't, but the CEOs, the owners, have a lot of money. And now they're using their platform to push a liberal agenda. And it's turning people off. User numbers are in decline. People are signing off. I haven't been to my Facebook account in I don't know how long. I probably ought to just go ahead and close it outright. And their bottom lines are starting to show it. Now, that is not going to make their stockholders happy. So there's going to be more pressure from the stockholders as well as from Devin Nunes and Representative Gates and Donald Trump to basically clean up their act. Now, the FCC, when they were fooling around with net neutrality, should have classified the internet as a common carrier communication system, just like the telephone system, where everybody's traffic is carried equally. Of course, that didn't sit well with the major corporations, which want to dominate the bandwidth and deliver more content to you or more ads to you. But it would have forced these social media outlets to basically have an unbiased, unfiltered platform. But the pushback is beginning. Meanwhile, Google is planning to launch a censored search engine in China. This according to some leaked documents. Remember, Google was over there in China, and the Chinese government said, we have to have some control over what's being searched for. And Google said, apparently, yes, and the project is codenamed Dragonfly. And so Google has just demonstrated that when a government says, please censor for us, they're perfectly willing to do that. It sure isn't the nice company we saw in that movie, The Interns, is it? Now, speaking of ads, one of the things that has been very frustrating is that when cable TV first came along, its attraction was you would pay a monthly fee and you got TV without commercials. And everybody signed on up, and cable TV was the thing. And then as the on-air broadcasters started to fade away, then all of a sudden the commercials showed up. So you're paying for the TV and you're still getting showered with commercials. And I watched a show the other day with a stopwatch. I'm not going to tell you which channel it was. There were more commercials than actual program. Now, in the days of on-air television, there were limits on how many commercials you could have, but these days they're just piling it on. It's a good reason to have that DVR option so that you can record your shows and then go back through them and skip those commercials, because that's just one after the other. We're talking about 6, 7 commercials in a row. And I want to share an insight from my days when I worked in advertising, that you can't overwhelm your audience with that many ads. First of all, if they know they're going to be seeing 7 ads, they're not going to sit there. They're going to get up, they're going to get a snack from the fridge, they're going to hit the bathroom, they're going to stretch their legs, and they'll come back when they're expecting to see the program come back on. Or worse, if they're getting all these ads, they could hit that channel button. And Claire and I right now, our viewing habits, we don't have a lot of time to watch a lot of TV, but when we watch TV, we're starting to literally look for those channels which have more programming and less commercials. And it is amazing how people in advertising today have forgotten the basic rules. That it was just common sense stuff. And of course, yeah, I'm talking about back in the 1980s when I was at Robert Abel and Associates, and we knew what we were doing, and we knew how to make commercials that worked. We won awards. I've won Clios. I've got a bunch of medals in the trunk somewhere. So you might want to listen to me. And I understand why the channels are doing it. They're all struggling for revenue, because more and more people are starting to cut that cable in favor of real-time streaming, which so far seems to have less commercials, I might point on out here. Now, here's an interesting story that just came on out. Apparently, the United Nations is planning to draft a new constitution for Syria, and the UN envoy to Syria, Staffan de Mistura, plans to hold a meeting with Russia, Iran, and Turkey regarding the formation of a constitutional committee to draft a new constitution for Syria. I note that Bashar al-Assad is not included in that invite. And in any event, shouldn't a new constitution for Syria be up to the Syrian people? This is a last-ditch effort to hijack the government of Syria to Western control. Never give up, do they? Over on, let's see, BBC, they have this genealogy show, Who Do You Think You Are? Claire loves it. And every week there'll be a celebrity where the show will pay for the genealogical research to find out about their family history. And sometimes it can be very, very interesting. Little bit of an embarrassment because singer Marvin Humes was on the show and he wanted to trace back his ancestry to his own slave roots in Jamaica. And it proved to be a bit of an embarrassment because it turned out his ancestor in Jamaica was a slave owner. His 4 times great-grandfather on his father's side, John Brown Williams, owned 2 slaves that worked his 20-acre plot of land in Jamaica. And Marvin says right on the show he had no idea that black people had ever kept slaves. Yeah, a lot of the slave owners in the antebellum South were black. Marvin's been listening to too many liberals and their fairy tales here. Well, apparently over in Las Vegas, the FBI special agent in charge, Aaron Roos, in a radio interview said he's convinced that only one shooter was active on the Strip during the 1st of October attack and says that shooter is deceased. Well, that settles the Mandalay Bay shooting because if you can't trust the FBI, who can you trust? Now, again, with the FBI, a retired FBI counterterrorism agent who had a major role in the story of 9/11 says that the FBI's Office of the General Counsel told him not to cooperate with attorneys representing 9/11 victims in their suit against the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia because it could harm U.S.-Saudi relations. Now, again, there is no evidence that the government of Saudi Arabia had anything to do with 9/11. It's just demonization and, hey, who's got the money? We'll sue the people with the most money, which is something lawyers think in terms of. You want to file a lawsuit. Okay, has the person you're suing got any money? No? Then why bother? You know, let's move up the food chain. Let's find somebody who's got a lot of money and we'll find a reason to sue them. Now, Maxine Waters, maybe will have to take time away from preaching violence to her masses. She's been slapped with an FEC complaint regarding how she raises campaign money and why a substantial portion of that money went into the bank account of her daughter. Now, Maxine Waters has reportedly raked in hundreds of thousands of dollars to add names of other state politicians to her slate mailers. Now, those mailers, described by the LA Weekly as sleaze, resemble an official sample ballot with quotes from Waters explaining her support. In the last election cycle alone, she hauled in $56,000 from this operation. Since 2004, Waters' daughter has been paid over $750,000 to mail the flyers out. So, yeah, you can tell it's election season here. Alrighty. The sun has been without sunspots for 33 of the past 34 days. To find a similar stretch of blank suns, you have to go back to 2009 when the sun was experiencing the deepest solar minimum in a century. So solar minimum has returned, bringing extra cosmic rays, long-lasting holes in the sun's atmosphere, and auroral displays, including very unusual pinkish ones. Well, why is this important? Well, because the carbon Nazis are still out there pushing hottest year on record, global warming, They're blaming the wildfires on it, even though some have now been confirmed to be started by arsonists. They're still pushing that we should all bow down to a global environmental authority who will keep us from destroying planet Earth. Well, you know, we're not destroying planet Earth. Wars are destroying planet Earth. Unrestrained migration is destroying planet Earth. They want to blame carbon dioxide, say it's all your fault, and demand taxes and obedience here. Now, there have been several embarrassments in the Carbon Nazis campaign, not the least of which the prediction back in 2000 that snow was a thing of the past, or Al Gore's prediction that the Arctic would be entirely ice-free by, I think it was 2014 that he said that. That didn't happen. And there was the picture of polar bears on this melting ice floe that was captioned, "Polar bears about to drown thanks to global warming." And it turned out the picture had been taken in summer when ice does melt naturally, and polar bears can swim anyway. And now there's a new one. Photographer Paul Nicklin was out there with this gentleman named Mittermeier, and they admit their mission was to capture images that communicate the urgency of climate change. And they found this emaciated polar bear, and they took the picture, and it was posted all around the Carbon Nazi forums, "Polar bear dying of climate change." And the photographer has now been forced to admit that it's basically false. They caught the polar bear just coming out of hibernation, and polar bears lose a lot of weight. You know, they fatten up for hibernation, and then they go to sleep during the winter, and when they come out in the spring, they're very thin. And that was what this polar bear was. Had nothing to do with climate change. They're still out there lying through their teeth. That's what happens when you don't really teach science in the schools anymore. Now, as you know, even though we are making stink face at Russia, even though we're sanctioning Russia, there are some areas where the U.S. has to do business with them, and one of those areas continues to be rocket engines. Apparently, the company's attempting to start up and rebuild our rocketry industry. They're off to a slow start. So Russia will continue supplying the RD-180 rocket engines used by NASA and the Pentagon till at least 2020. And they've signed a new contract, and so the rocket engines will be coming on in, and they're used by NASA. They're used in the first stage of the Atlas V rockets as well. Now, over in Great Britain, they're dealing with the problem of nuclear waste, as are we all. It's piling up all over the place. These fission reactors are putting out all of this highly toxic material. Nobody's come up with a plan what to do with it. And it just keeps piling up. And just put it over there someplace. Hanford is a disaster. So is Fukushima. It's out of control. Over in Great Britain, they've come up with what they think is a brilliant plan. They're going to begin burying their radioactive waste under the country's national parks and areas of outstanding natural beauty. So people are going to go to these national parks and these very beautiful vistas and not realize they're standing over radioactive waste. What could possibly go wrong with this? This is backed by the British government. And it's not really a solution. It's not really a solution. It's just, we're just going to make it look like it's going away. And we're going to make it look like it's okay. Sacha Baron Cohen is in a little more trouble now. He's been accused of plagiarizing a Redditor's 9/11 theory for his Truthbrary conspiracy site. And basically, he just copied and pasted the entire story about what happened on 9/11 from this Redditor's page for his Truthbrary, which was made to mock right-wingers and promote his new Showtime program, Who is America? And so Cohen's 9/11 theory page is directly lifted from Redditor Fit Frank's My 9/11 Theory post last year. Cohen gave no credit to Fit Frank and did not link to his post. basically implying that it was his work. Now, apparently this Who is America show, again, it's targeting conservatives. They want to make conservatives look bad. And, of course, I don't get Showtime, so I'm not going to be seeing it, nor would I be inclined to do so if I did. But we've been hearing of some very underhanded tactics that Cohen has been using, including disguises, complete misrepresentation about what he's doing. That's unethical. And it's not even funny. We'll be right back after these few words. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. Last segment of our program today, and we're going to take one more phone call from Anthony in Tucson. Aloha, Anthony. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Well, I was just wondering if, being that people are pretty much exposed that we're totally under a criminal government, if there was any possibility of filing a lawsuit against the 9 Supreme Court justices, all of the lower courts, because at one time there was a suit disqualifying all of the United States courts because they're operating under the Jewish Talmud, and it would include.
Who would you file such hello, Anthony. Who would you file such a lawsuit with? I mean, once you file a court, I think the 10th article in the Constitution. Where would you file such a lawsuit?
You file a lawsuit in the court itself, but once you do that, the court then loses jurisdiction under. Let me see what section that is.
It kind of sounds like wishful thinking to me, and let's just say I disagree with this on practical grounds. Okay, but
here it is. It's Article 11. The judicial power of the United States shall not be construed to extend to any suit in law or equity commenced or prosecuted against one of the United States by citizens of another state or by citizens of or subject of a foreign state. When I did that to Judge Donfeld, disqualified the courts because they no longer operate under common law. They're forcing them into either equity or admiralty jurisdictions. Even the driver's licenses, if you'll notice, all driver's licenses, the person's name is in capital letters because they can only control commerce. They can't control a private individual. So anybody that their names are in capital letters, whether it's on a Social Security card or a driver's license or an IRS form, you're considered a business and they have a right to control you.
Well, I think you're reading more into that than is actually there. I think the reason they use all caps is because, a lot of people, especially elderly ones, their eyesight is not that great, and I think it's really for legibility. Anyway, Anthony, we're out of time. I'm going to let you go here. Thank you very much for the phone call. And apparently over at Ancestry, 23andMe, and these other genetic testing companies, they've agreed to a new voluntary privacy policy, including additional consent forms and annual reports about how many requests they receive from police for DNA data. So apparently people's awareness that your DNA was being saved, stored, recorded, possibly forwarded on to the police, that was affecting their business as well. The Russian military has just released a video made during last week's drill in the Caspian Sea showing a Sukhoi 34 launching an AS-17 Kipton missile at a target ship and just absolutely obliterating it. Okay, there's the music. Time for me to get on out of here and get something useful done with the rest of the day. Please stay tuned for John Stedmiller. I'm sure he's got lots of interesting things to share with you as well. Take what you learn here, share it with your friends. Don't go through social media. It's all heavily filtered right now until somebody sues them back to a sense of fairness. Use email. Use face-to-face. Go back to the sneaker net. Just talk to everybody around you and just share with them all the craziness that's going on. Anyway, we'll be back tomorrow. Aloha, America.